web development in times of AI, because you can't get past the topic of AI right now. And there's a lot of like, oh my God, our jobs are going to be gone. And there's a lot of like, oh, you're going to be more effective if you use the thing that's not quite ready yet and you don't have access to. And it's just very annoying to see these kind of things that we keep repeating the same mistakes. I love that like Copilot knows exactly what I'm about to do, and it's like a div with random classes and it offers him 500 other divs. And sadly enough, when you look around the internet, that's actually quite common. But hopefully it's not the thing that you are going to write, because we're all better than that. So all resources in this talk are behind this QR code. It's going to be at the end again as well. And I sent it in social media earlier about the thing as well. It's a gist with all the links in it. If you want to type it down, it's 898B. No, okay. Remember when I still worked for Microsoft, I had access to the aka.ms short thing? I don't have that anymore, so that's sad. So who am I? I'm a 25-year-old developer. 25-year-old. I've been a web developer for over 25 years. I wrote 3 JavaScript books, contributed to a dozen others. I'm a W3C member of the Machine Learning on Device group. I worked on Firefox, Microsoft Edge, and the last 3 years I was the principal program manager for developer tools of Chromium, Edge, and also Visual Studio Code integration of those. So in short, I know this shit. And it's been a fun ride, and it's still a fun ride. I'm also a big fan of AI. And in 2018, I did the Skillshare course about demystifying artificial intelligence, understanding machine learning, which was actually more about APIs and facial recognition and natural language processing and all the things. And back then I was excited about it, and I didn't think it would take off that quickly. But then out of a sudden, the hardware became so much better, and out of a sudden, GPT came out, and now it's exploding everywhere. It's exciting to see that NVIDIA went bankrupt almost twice, and now it's like the hardware provider for anything machine learning. Should I have had shares in them? Yeah, I should, but I didn't. And I'm worried about the AI and the hype around it. I'm worried about it because we're in a hype cycle again. We're once again, everybody is an AI expert that used to be a Web3 expert or a multiverse expert or whatever it was called a month ago. On LinkedIn, it's just painful to see how many, every single day, everybody tells you this is AI and you should know about it. So generative AI is everywhere, and it's an exciting and newish idea. It's not the AI that we had in the past, where we basically said, like, okay, you do facial recognition or you do handwriting recognition. It's basically you talk to the computer and the computer does something for you. May it be images, may it be sounds, may it be deepfake videos, or may it just be code. And conversational UI is great because it's a thing that we grew up with. We saw that in science fiction movies. We love because it lowers the barrier to access. Like, my parents would never use a keyboard or a mouse or a joystick, but they would say, an Alexa, they're like, oh, play some music, or what's the weather like? And it should say, look outside, that's the weather. So you shouldn't need Alexa for that, but actually it's there. It's also highly engaging because people are now excited about talking to GPT and talking to the things that they've never done before. It's exciting for a short amount of time, though, I think. So that will be interesting how far down the line this will change. And it has a true sci-fi feel. It's that computer shoot down the Klingon ship or something. And we saw that in the movies, and we wanted to have that with our computers as well. At the same time, it's kind of creepy that we have machines all the time listening to us. But it's the kind of thing that we got used to. It also has quite a few issues. The results are only as good as the questions. Like, you have to ask the right question in the right format to get a proper result. And that's the same in human conversation, if you think about it. It's time-consuming. It's actually much, much easier just to get a search result and copy and paste from Stack Overflow than to talk for 15 minutes to ChatGPT until you get the final result. But you don't realize it because it's cool to do at the moment. And there's no reliable attribution. So basically, where does it come from? Don't know. But it sounds great. It's just basically obviously the right result. With Google, we had like this I feel lucky button. And you always thought like that's the first result that is actually probably the best, which it never was. But with these systems, most of the time, this is only one result. And that's we should be very, very lucky if it's really the best result. Because quality control is based on the flimsy idea that if the conversation has finished, the answer was right. That's how most of these models actually upvote the thing that came on. It's a bit like having an argument with your partner, and you're saying, like, is everything okay? And they say, yeah, everything is good. you probably would have to ask another question because it might not all be good yet. And we had that with these personal assistants like OK Google, Siri, Alexa, Cortana, Bixby. Nobody, right? Like it's a Samsung one. And we all said, they came out and everybody said like, oh, these are the new apps. Bots are the new apps. Microsoft said that on stage. And Siri is going to be helping us control our day and actually make us much more efficient. And if we all look at it right now, all we do is set an alarm for 5 minutes called pasta is ready. Because we got disappointed so many times by those things not giving us the right results. And basically, it's time-consuming to talk to your computer and not get the right results back. So the biggest skill is asking the right questions. That's from the iRobot movie, where you must ask the right questions. It was actually quite insightful. That came out a long time ago. So, and that's in the coding world, that's called prompt engineering. There's a great course on the deep learning AI. I've done it one. It's a JavaScript course, and it takes about like an hour. And it's actually much more fun than an interview with Google or others. And it's something that you can learn there. And it's also, there's the generative AI learning path from Google Skills where you actually learn about the LLMs and how they work and what you can do with it. So prompt engineering is the big thing that everybody says we have to consider now. It's kind of already passé, but it's still an interesting thing because you know how these systems work. And I, as a developer, always want to look under the hood and see how something works. I just want to say, like, ChatGPT is magic. No, it isn't. Magic doesn't exist. I learned the hard way. Generative AI is in the full hype phase. It's basically, these Twitter threads like, here's like 37 new AI tools you need to know by tomorrow or you're going to fall behind. It's not uncommon. And the amount of startups that are actually a plugin for ChatGPT is quite astounding as well. There's about 200 a day. I like that in the New Scientist the other day, like a science fiction author, my novel is a cautionary tale about capitalism and its consequence of creating powerful technologies without considering the moral implications. And the tech company, this novel is so cool, let's build some of those things. We do that right now. We basically, it's cool, it's new technology, everything is AI. I love how we use ChatGPT to turn 3 bullet points into a very nice formal email with all the things that need to be in there, just for the person on the other side to use ChatGPT to turn that email into 3 bullet points. Because I wrote a lot of job applications lately, the amount of random nonsense you have to write in there that like hiring people look for, and they don't look for them, they have bots looking for those things. So we're kind of out the equation, we just burn a lot of energy in between. It's quite interesting to see that we'd never thought about, like, we can over-optimize ourselves, and that's what we do right now. But then this came out. GPT-4 makes web developers obsolete. It was basically the demo of GPT-4 where he painted a thing on paper for some reason. He built a website on paper and then took a blurry picture of it with his mobile phone, and then it generated the code for that website for him, which is a website that had 2 buttons, and when you clicked the button, it showed you a joke. The quality here is not good, but that's also because the quality of the code was rubbish. So it generated that, my joke website, and people were like, oh my God, that's it. Web developers, we don't need to pay them anymore. We now can get rid of all these smelly people in the back room, and we can make these things easier. Nobody paid for this website ever. Nobody needed this website ever, because it's just a demo thing that is just there to show something. It's an old misguided dream that you can go from a design to a web product. But this is not web development at all. This is one part of it. That's the start of a journey, most likely. So we had this in the past. Somebody remember front page, Microsoft front page. That was the beginning of my career. In 1995, I said, okay, I want to build websites. How do I do that? I wrote games for Commodore 64 and Amiga before that. And people like, okay, you need front page for that. And I'm like, okay, I'm a student, I don't have any money. Do you have a pirated copy of front page? He never found one. So I downloaded the HTML specification and learned it instead. So that was the beginning of my career. So luckily enough, I didn't go for piracy, so that's why I have a job now. Not at the moment, but soon again. But this was basically paint your website, and the magic in the background will make it work on every browser, on every environment. But this is not web development. This is painting a website. And this is going as far as like, this is a product called Galileo that asks you to do like a ChatGPT style thing, make me an onboarding screen for a dog walking app. And then it generates the app for you, and this is what it looks like. And then like a settings page for users to change their name, phone number, and password, and it changes that one, and it creates that one. And people are going nuts about this. And I'm like, how is this different from downloading a WordPress template? Or like any like generated thing? It's just, it's a more complex way of picking out a template and downloading a perfect website. But the interesting bit is that it all looking a bit samey. It's trained on thousands of outstanding designs. Because obviously a design that worked for somebody else is really going to be good for you as well. That funeral parlor website is probably great for your joke shop, or I don't know. It's even getting better that it offers you the full product copy in an instant, so there's nothing of you in that product. There's really nothing in there that could not be generated and basically is for the bin generated. This is what SEO black hat people used to do. They did a copy from a website and created 5,000 of those that linked to each other, and that's all that garbage on the internet that's still there. But the problem is that it's cheap and it's easy to do. So that was in the Washington Post the other day, that like ChatGPT and LLM tools have replaced people that do marketing websites and social media for websites. So even if the quality of the content is not as good as the writers, it's still cheaper than the writers. So again, should we not question if we need this rubbish online? Or should we question if a human should do it? If a computer can do it, then probably a human is not needed to do it. We can do other things, better things. It's a bit like when people say like, oh, people come into this country and take the jobs away. You're like, if somebody who doesn't speak your language takes the job away, then either you're really bad or the job was not meant for you in the first place. So don't give me that rubbish. So AI will take our jobs. We will have machines taking our jobs away from us. And jobs we never had to do. I love this. Last build, a few weeks ago, Microsoft launches AI tool to take the pain out of building websites. The key thing to note is that Power Pages Copilot is not an automatic AI pilot generating websites, but an AI assistant to a human website maker, where the maker can ask for suggestions how to build different components of a business data-centric site. This description of my job would mean I would never have become a web developer. This sounds boring as toast. This is unbelievably bad. But it went even better when it said like Power Pages now allows you to go from no code, describing the site via natural language, to low code, editing the website design and layouts using the design studio, to pro code, building advanced customization with familiar web frameworks seamlessly. The last thing I doubt, that will never happen. The first two I actually like. Because who here has used Power Pages or heard of Power Pages? Cassie showed that you can build wonderful things on the web with great animations that are delightful little interactions, making machines do or making browsers do the things we want to do. Building Power Pages means you get to cry in the break room. It's the SharePoint, it's a new version of SharePoint. These sites need to be built, but damn it, you don't need a web developer for that. You just need somebody that connects one data source with another with an unreadable form that nobody needs to fill out because they're going to send an email when they didn't understand the thing anyways. This is what Power Pages are kind of there. And for that, please take that job away. I don't want to do that as a web developer. They're boring, repetitive jobs that don't need to be done by developers. They're slideware, vaporware, prototypes, or web scraping and data cleanup. That's another thing where AI is really good. I mean, I worked on Puppeteer and I worked on Playwright to actually automate things on websites. That's where AI is really good for, to do these little changes for you that you don't want to do. But web development is not creating a graphical interface. And it's also not defining a single interaction, like press a button to see a joke. Who the hell needs that? Show me the bloody joke, you know, if it's only one joke anyway. Web development means building interfaces that work in dozens of environments. It can be a mobile phone, it can be a laptop, it can be a cool $4,000 glasses thing that looks like you're scuba diving. It could be whatever people want to use the web for. It allows for user customization. People need to set a high contrast mode. People need to change the font size around. People need to change the screen around so they can actually only see a part of your page. Your web product should also work with all these kind of needs. It favors the most important interactions. The search box in Google works no matter what, because that's where their money comes from. The rest is just nice to have. Whereas like the joke website that they built does nothing when there's one JavaScript error. So it's not even, the site is a joke, but the joke is not a joke because you can't see it. It adds more convenience when and if possible. Like, make it easier. The search box shows me a preview, shows me images, shows me videos, these kind of things. When it's possible, it shows me more things. Web development means not blocking anyone out. And you can't do that when you start with a design. You can do that when you start with an idea. What do I want my users to get from that web product that I do? That might be, I want to show my website. Great. Show me where your restaurant is and the menu. Don't give me a 3D view of your restaurant and a welcome email or a video from the chef telling us what he was cooking this last month. Making sure that people's data is safe is another very important thing that we don't do enough. Dealing with unknown content. We saw that earlier in some of the talks. Like every time I got a button and it said like, this is the button and this is what fits in, I translated that thing to German and sent it back to them. Because if German fits in, then probably you have a design that's flexible enough for almost anything out there. Delivering experience as fast and convenient as possible. Bam, get that information out there, then enhance it, then load the pages, then load the images, then load the annoying things that I don't really want. So let's focus on productivity, using AI to make our jobs as web developers easier and better instead of just being afraid that they will replace us. There's 3 ways AI can augment our current work. Machine-aided code completion, Uma talked about that a bit. I will talk about that much more as well. Design-to-code conversion, I will talk a bit about that, not much. And collaboration and learning. Because what I find working with large teams, distributed teams, is that our continuous learning as developers and sharing that with the team is really not working at the moment because we don't have time for it. But if we start automating more things using AI, we have more time to actually make our teams be more efficient. So let's start with machine-aided code completion. Smart autocomplete has been around for a long, long time. You have, for example, Excel, where you say January, it offers you February, March, April, and May. Or you see like the glass is half full, the glass is half empty, or Excel says the glass is 1st of February. So we were disappointed by that stuff in the past a lot, but it's got much, much better these days. And it's quite amazing how all the LLMs that we use, ChatGPT is basically all predictive texting of what the next word is going to be of what you typed in. Much like your mobile phone keyboard learns from you the more you use it. I use mine in 3 languages, so when I start a sentence, it actually does the autocompletion in other languages. I didn't know that feature existed, but it does that for me. That's cool. That's AI that I don't know about, and it really does something nice for me. AI peer programmers are GitHub Copilot, Amazon Code Whisperer, which is like a really, really cool name, and Ghostwriter that was acquired by Google for Bard. I tried Copilot since the very beginning. I played with Code Whisperer a bit, and I don't have access to Bard because obviously the internet is only in America and not anywhere else. So the initial criticisms of sensible worries are still there about these auto-completing code things for us. Like, is it okay for a paid system to provide results from the web? I don't get money when actually somebody gets my JavaScript code from 10 years ago. I don't even know that the LLM shows it. With a search engine, at least I knew that it was coming there because I got a trackback and I knew when people were reading it. What about the code license? Is it safe to use these results? Does it mean developers are obsolete? Won't this promote terrible code? Like, you don't know the quality of the code when it's just being displayed in ChatGPT, right? And what about unsafe code? How is this a new thing? In 2015, I wrote the full stack overflow developer blog post, where I realized that we have a whole generation of new developers that basically, when they get stuck, they go to Stack Overflow, they find the first result, copy and paste some text out of it, change some numbers around until nothing explodes, and then put it back into GitHub. We've all done it. There is no Perl developers on this planet. The first 2 years of Perl, I just copied random stuff and I didn't understand what I was doing. Same with JavaScript. I got like 2 years of payment as a JavaScript developer. Then I wrote my first JavaScript book, and then you can't fake it anymore because you have to explain what you're doing. So that was really interesting for me as well to realize copy and pasting is one thing. But what the difference with those machine-aided computing things now is that they're more than automated copy and paste. they do more than just allowing, than automating me going to Stack Overflow and copying the first result back. Senior developers know the fourth result is the good one, not the first one, by the way. They recognize the context as well, like what's happening in the rest of the code base, where was this implemented, and they also do style recognition and mimicking. The more I used Copilot, the more it wrote code like I write code, rather than just like random code from the internet that's not matching up with the other methods in the same product and these kind of things. It can explain code. That's something that is really, I didn't think that actually was possible, but it does it really well. And it can translate code from one language to another, which is, of course, absolutely atrocious quality, but it's a really good way to learn another language, to try it out. Like, I wrote this JavaScript, what would that look like in Perl? Okay, unreadable. Okay, what would it look like in Python? Oh, spaces make sense now. Okay, let's try that. So you can actually start finding out new things that way. And it learns. The results get better the more you use it, the more you actually do it. Like that feedback mechanism, when you use that code, it says, like, okay, that's obviously better than the others, so we actually show that to the rest of the team as well. Context recognition is interesting. I've got this, I wrote this HTML. I've got a UL with an ID and a list item with a test link in there and a button with data snippet test and copy as the text of the button. All I wrote was document query selector snippets, and actually I forgot the hash there, but okay. And then add event listener. And then it realized I want actually not an event listener on that LI, but I want event delegation. So it recognized, okay, what's the thing that's probably the clickable in there? It's probably the button, and then it actually did the prevent default, and then it read out the data that was in there, and from the copy, the name of the button, it inferred that I probably want to put it to the clipboard. So I didn't have, I wanted to write that code, but only from the HTML, Copilot realized this is probably the functionality that you want. And I was blown away. This is great, because for the first time, I actually get a benefit from writing clean HTML and sensible HTML, rather than people on Stack Overflow telling me it's unnecessary because there's frameworks for that. So it was really interesting that the machine knew from the HTML what the JavaScript should be and also what the CSS would be. And you can do that in a code base as well. So this is a larger code base where I started to write something new. And this is the interaction that I do with Copilot. I basically get line by line, it tells me what that is, and that's probably the functionality that you want. And then I can highlight the thing and can say, like, you know what, explain that to me because I don't understand it. So it explains it in English what that code is. I can then say, okay, I want to have some tests because I want to make sure that this thing works. So I can rewrite it. I needed to do that other function syntax, and then suggest a new test, and then it can generate the tests for that new function as well, directly while I'm coding the thing. So rather than just relying on ChatGPT to give me some code back, I can see immediately in my environment what that code does, and if I don't understand it, I get it explained to me. Other interesting interaction models are code brushes. That's also part of Copilot Labs. That's a bit like in Photoshop when you use the brush when there's a blemish in the image. And that's exactly what they do for code. So in this case here, I've got a JavaScript with an error in it because it is an equal sign, not 3 equal signs. So it doesn't actually does a comparison. So I can highlight this and can say, like, fix the bug. And then it realized, okay, it needs 3 equal signs. I can then clean it. Then it creates an else statement for me. I can list the steps, and it gives me comments what each of these things mean. I can make it more robust by getting like a try and catch around it, and I can add types to actually see those. So that is a great way for a junior developer to actually start playing with a bit of code and finding out why some issues are there or how they can make something better. What might be a good idea to put around like a try and catch. And of course, rubber duck coding is a thing where you want to talk to the machine while you're doing it. So putting the ChatGPT client directly inside Visual Studio Code is also a very good idea because it actually gives me the code and I can copy it over. And Uma showed that as well, that that's actually possible right now. And it does the code, it explains the code to me. I can also interact with the object with the product that I have open and only get functionality from that in that chat interface if I want to have that kind of chat thing. It was interesting when Uma earlier showed the voice recognition, like voice recognition for code generation, and it's actually only an accessibility feature. That's why Copilot wanted that in there, because They realized not everybody can type, not everyone can type fast, so they actually built a voice recognition so you can start coding by talking to your machine. But it's not necessarily the best and most obvious way because it's fraught with errors because computers understand ourselves the wrong way. There was this YouTube video of somebody reviewing Copilot, and he was like, oh, I can't wait for voice recognition so I can start coding while I'm on the treadmill. And I'm like, oh, just shut up, like... overachieving Muppet. Like, it's really like, no, it's not so we can actually code more. This is there so we can code fewer things that are better. That the machine can tell us like, that probably is the good thing to use rather than just write more, we need more code. Because the crucial step is validation and linting, and that's what's missing in the ChatGPT interfaces and or the Bing interfaces or whatever else doesn't give you a development environment to put these things in. Because as soon as the code is generated, your linter should hit in. Like in this case, I've got this image there, it got a squiggly line under it, and it tells me image must have an alternative text. Your image that was generated doesn't have an alternative text. If a button doesn't have button type, then Safari wouldn't recognize it as a button. It would tell you that thing as well. So the editor then gives you not only the generated code, but also the quality of it and saying like, that is how you should fix it. This is how you should actually work with that kind of thing. That's the DevTools for Code extension that I wrote on. You can just install it in the background, and in your code, you will get these squiggly lines, and in the problems pane of Visual Studio Code, you will get a list of all the things that are wrong in your whole product, and you can fix them one by one. And that includes security, performance, accessibility, and browser compatibility with other environments. So that's something that I learned myself. It's just wonderful to have because these squiggly lines are annoying as hell. And I want to get rid of them as soon as they're in my code. Because bad actors are already center stage. There's actually LLMs offer packages that don't exist. And package name squatting has been an attack vector for quite a while. People upload malware with like a typo in the package. So if you write an include, a require that actually isn't checking anything, it will load the malware thing and execute it. But they're doing that now using LLMs and actually seeing what errors they make and create packages on the fly so people can actually inject wrong code. Another big problem I see with the LLMs is that they're normally old. 2 to 3 years, sometimes 1 year, depending how much money you pay and which company you use. So the other day I used some for Puppeteer, for example, for Playwright, and it generated the code for me, and the thing didn't work, and I didn't know why. And it was because the API of Playwright changed, and the code was from 2 years ago, from the official documentation, but it still was from 2 years ago. So basically, the machine is kind of outdated. So that's why a lot of CSS that ChatGPT or Copilot offers you doesn't use the newest, coolest stuff, but uses like tried and true, terrible things like absolute positioning and floats and all these kind of things out there. So what can a learning editor help with? Detection of reusable code, code standard definition and application. By actually finding code that works for the whole team, it can actually then say like, hey, we should write it that way every single time. This should be a reusable component and not these 6-hour conversations you have in meeting rooms, what our code standard should be. I remember one time I had an American colleague that wanted us to list the attributes in HTML alphabetically because that packs better on the server with gzip. And I should basically ask the 400 engineers of my company back then to please start doing that. And I wrote a script that did it automatically, so they didn't have to do it, but he was happy as well. But that kind of stuff you don't want to do. It's much better if the computer tells you, this is actually, do you want this? Yeah, I want that. And then out of a sudden, the whole team realizes it's a good thing to have. And it works. There's this research that actually shows that like 50%, 55.8% faster development in teams when they use GitHub Copilot over a while than before that. Might be an outlier, but it's actually quite a good paper. The other thing that I'm looking into is design to code conversion. So the idea of like painting a thing on paper and then generating code is stupid. But designing something that we do nowadays in a browser, we don't do that in Photoshop anymore. We do that actually in Canva, or we do that in all kind of other systems. That is a much more interesting way because we write components in our designs and we write components in our systems as code. So why do we rewrite them? Why don't we realize that a component in the design is already something that could generate a component and then just needs some tweaking? There's a tool called Locify for that. that actually allows you to write, to paint your designs and then actually annotate them and get automatic annotation. Like this should probably be a button. Do you want this to be generated as a button? This should probably be a label. This one is not connected with that one. Is there something that you want to have? And it actually works with Figma, with Adobe XD, Storybook, and so on and so forth, generates the code, and then you can actually put it out on GitHub, Versal, or wherever you want to go. I really like that idea. I'm still at the early stages talking with them and a few others that do the same thing, because I don't want this to be like, oh, we just do a design to thing. I want a design component to code component thing, and that's something that they started there. Deck, which probably all of you know in terms of like accessibility testing, also have a Figma plugin that allows you to actually annotate things automatically. So it would share design and say like, that's a heading, that's a button. Make sure that actually that doesn't have enough contrast. So instead of building the thing and then actually finding all the accessibility issues, you find it immediately in your design code. That's also a free plugin for that you can use in there. But more interesting to me is also the collaboration and learning thing. Can we use these AI bits to teach new engineers or people that come in that actually want to get started? Can we make sure that people get sensible answers from these machines? One thing I like, for example, is Copilot for pull requests. Pull requests are an important thing, but they're also very annoying. Most of the time, we don't write them properly, and then 3 weeks later, we come back to the code. We don't understand them because we haven't written a proper pull request. So what Copilot does in this case is you can actually say Copilot summary, and then you can say which issue is being fixed, and then you say like Copilot walkthrough, and then for some reason Copilot poem or whatever, and then it generates actually those things for you. So it takes the summary. It realizes the code that has been changed and tells you what has been changed in that code. And then it actually has a walkthrough bit by bit what was happening in the code, what was being changed, and what that means to the whole product. Probably needs some editing afterwards, but that's a lot of things I don't have to write. And I think it's a very, very good thing to have a clean repository because that's where people learn from. Copilot for command line is also interesting. So you can do a question mark, and then you can write something. I want to convert all videos in the folder to a size, and it creates the shell script for you and the explanation what the shell script does, and then you can run this command immediately, or you can revise the query and go on with it as well. That is also for Git, so you can do a question mark at any Git command, and then it actually tells you like, oh, I made something wrong in Git, how do I revert to the last branch? And it would tell you these kind of things in a step-by-step explanation as well. Again, this is the same in essence as what ChatGPT does, but as it happens in the context of the terminal, and you don't have to go to the browser and copy and paste random things in and not understand how to paste into a terminal. It's much, much better that way. And I love it that you can actually run these commands immediately as well. But what about quality and relevance? What about the things that come back? I think one interesting thing is to limit the sources. Umar showed that how you can do that with your local code. But Copilot for Docs is basically that. So instead of giving you results from the huge LLM of the web with like magic pixies in it and whatever, it actually gives you only from the GitHub documentation or from MDN or from Playwright documentation or Svelte and SvelteKit and or GitHub Primer. So you only get content from the official documentation that way. Much more interesting, I think, in this interface, and that is something that any prompt engineering course teaches you as well, is that you can filter. You can say like, I want this to be for me as an intermediate developer. I know this material well, or I don't know it at all, or I want a balanced response, or I want just the data. So I don't want it to explain to me. I just forgot what the syntax was. So just give me the information. So that way you can filter out how you want to use that chat system on the official documentation. And once you've done that, you can say like, how do I use the fetch API? And it gives you these side panels here where it says like, this is where that's from. So that's the attribution where that information came from the official documentation. And then you can copy the code over and you can start using it. So instead of getting random things, you can have like just the official documentation filtered down on that. That works with any documentation on GitHub. And I think it's a very, very interesting thing to see. So I want to finish this with a call to arms for quality-oriented web developers and designers. I want you to realize that we're in the middle of an automation process that could go really wrong. not take our jobs, but teach a whole new generation of developers random shit from 3 years ago on the internet in a clever fashion. I always like to call ChatGPT as automated mansplaining, because it can say absolute nonsense, but it does it in a very, very convincing manner. And you're always like, oh, that sounds reasonable. And then you try it out, like, that makes no sense at all. But the first 5 minutes, you always feel a bit stupid because the machine sounds so eloquent and really good about it. Actually, in English, in German and French, not so much. So this is a great time to be a developer who cares about users, as we can automate the boring bits. If you set up your environments like that, a lot of your work, your day-to-day work, is a few keystrokes, but you have more time to do user research. You have more time to actually do user testing. You have more time to actually do due diligence, find out what other companies are doing, research, training in the team. We have to find time to things to fill this time with, because otherwise people say we can actually bill you less. That's not a good idea. These integrated AI experiences augment the work of developers. They don't replace the human. And that's the marketing horseshit that basically is the joke website. They don't replace us. They make us better. That's good. But we also need to consider the effects this has on our careers. And that's something that I realized, like going from like a junior developer up to architect and then head of web development. And then in the end, I was principal technical program manager. I realized one thing, that the more you go up the ladder, the less you write code and the more you review code. So a junior developer writes a lot of code, a senior developer less, a lead developer probably spends most of his time reviewing what the senior and junior has done, or defines standards, or defines things that should be done next, or does research into other environments. Whereas like a principal only does reviews and doesn't write much code any longer. Which makes sense, because I mean, it's too expensive, those people, to actually send and make them spend hours on it. Their job is to lead those others and make those become better people, better employees, or that's just maybe me thinking that we should do that. But with generated code, the junior and senior kind of level merges, and it becomes that kind of like, most of the code is generated, so knowing the quality of it and being able to review and being able to assess the quality of the generated stuff is a skill that's much more interesting, and that actually means that we all need to do more. And it's not fun if you really like to code, but it's actually quite good for your career because you have more time to do other things, to care about the people who work for you, to make sure that they have all the resources that they need. But this is not going away. We just have one level less. And I think it's not a bad idea, seeing that people are just now turning the screw and saying, like, how many people can we sack because we can pretend we can optimize that workflow with AI? Anybody remember W3 Fools? W3 Schools was basically a thorn in my side as a web developer for a long, long time. It's a highly effective, really, really good website, very much Google juicy, very much SEO, and it seems really useful. You go there, you get the answer immediately, but it always explained you the how and not the why. It just gave you an answer without explaining why that answer is sensible or why you should do something that way. It was more or less a syntax lookup thing, which we don't need these days anymore because our editors do autocompletion anyways. It's much better these days, and the W3 Fools website has been defunct since 2010, I think, as well. But that was when we all stood up and said, like, hey, here's a resource that's highly successful and it gives people really bad advice. We should do something about that. And we managed to do something about that. And I think it's the same way we need to actually question those LLMs and question those big companies right now telling us that this is code we should be writing. So let's demand some answers. How can we get a better handle on what ChatGPT offers new learners? How can we filter that to something more sensible? How can I offer myself as an editor? I would do it for free. I would happily review code in that ChatGPT offers and say, like, that's rubbish, make that better. How can we limit what gets indexed? Robots text for LLMs, for example. Robots text allowed me to stop Google from indexing stuff in my website. So LLM.text could say, like, this is really bad demo code. Please don't index that. Don't do anything with it. I'm not proud of that. That should not be used. We had a few talks today where it's like, this is cool, but don't use that. But the machine wouldn't know that. They would index that and actually offer it to people. How can we ensure continuous updates? That like 2-year-old LLM offering me an include that doesn't work or an API that doesn't exist any longer is a bad thing. And could we not get an extra built-in validation step? that validation that my extension does for Visual Studio Code or other linters like ESLint does, that should be part of that when code is generated. That should be just a thing like, okay, this code is generated, but there's 3 errors in there. Let me show you those errors as well, and not just like, oh, here's a result. Are you happy? So let's teach the machines by telling them what isn't useful and feeding the data set with great results. I'm happy to point it at anything I've written that I'm proud of and basically say, index the hell out of that. But I can't. I don't even know how it's indexed. I don't even know how these systems are being read and what they do. And I think it's time we ask for more transparency on that and realize that we are the people that will not be replaced, but we will be the people that make these systems better for everyone else out there. The IT market needs people. We have not enough developers out there, but we're actually not going to get them if they're just going to use a system and copy and paste code that they don't understand. That's all I had, so thanks very much.